welcome to Murphy's Garden. This video is all about pleaching and how to create this effectively hedge on stilts which you see behind me. It's done by interlacing young branches onto a horizontal framework, and it has the advantage of adding privacy to your garden. So if you're overlooked, as we are, it just extends the line of privacy above the 6-foot fence. But best of all, it looks really good and it makes your garden look quite sort of designer like. You know, the gardens you see in magazines quite often use pleached trees, and they just looks a really nice effect. So pleaching differs from espalier trees. Espalier trees we have got in this garden, but they're growing with horizontal branches, and that's so that you can ripen fruit. But this, you want a solid wall effect. So this video will focus solely on the art of pleaching. We'll perhaps do a video on espalier trees another time. So pleaching is a horticultural art form. It goes back to Tudor times, when it was used to sort of show off as a status symbol, to show off the number of gardeners you were able to employ, because it is notoriously labour intensive. However, it is gaining popularity in gardens, and perhaps done on a smaller scale it is a bit more manageable for a keen gardener. It's not something to be taken lightly. It's not for everyone. It does require regular maintenance, annual maintenance, and you do require access on both sides of the row of pleached trees, because you need to tie the branches in, and for annual pruning as well. There are many trees that are suitable for pleaching, but they fall into two main categories, and they are evergreen trees and deciduous trees. And probably the most common used are Carpinus betulus, which is hornbeam, Tilia europaea, which is common lime, and Fagus sylvatica, which is beech and comes in green and also copper, which looks nice too. The best trees for pleaching must have a relatively short distance between the buds to give the density of branches required for this technique. Your chosen tree must also be quite a robust variety that can resist disease. Pleaching requires regular pruning, which leaves wounds open that have the potential for infection until fully healed. It is for this reason that horse chestnut, birch and cherry trees are not suitable for this technique. In this garden we have 3 rows of pleached trees. We've got 2 rows of hornbeam which create this kind of avenue, and then we've also got a new row of lime trees which we're in the process of pleaching. So this video is going to show you how to go through the whole process from start to finish to create this look, and eventually it will look like this in a few years. So if you want to create this pleached effect as we have done here, there are 4 different ways of doing that, and depending on your budget, the amount of work that you're prepared to put in and your skill level, there are 4 different ways. The first way is just to pay for somebody to come in and plant some trees for you and put in the whole structure. Obviously that's a really expensive way of doing it, and because it's a very time consuming process, tying in branches, it will cost a lot of money. So I presume if you're watching this video you're quite keen to do it yourself. So there are 3 ways of doing this. The first lot of trees that we planted were the row that you see behind me. So that was in 2014, so that was 8 years ago. And we had never done it before, so we had no experience of what to do. So we bought some pre-pleached trees from a local nursery, and they come on a bamboo framework ready to plant in the ground. I think they came root balled. So we had all the ground prepared. We dug out the holes, and when they came we lowered them into the ground, and then it was important to get them all in alignment, which is no easy task. It was quite difficult, and they were incredibly heavy. They were growing on clay soil, so they were really heavy, but we managed it and we put them in. And then the important thing to do is just to tie the framework all together so it's all fixed and as one. And also it's really important to put in really strong structural supports, but we'll look at that later in the video. So that was the first way of doing it. Now, from a price point of view, each tree cost, I remember, £120 per tree, and we wanted to plant 10 trees, so that worked out at about £1,500, and that was 8 years ago. At the time it was a big investment, but one that we felt was worth making because we were really overlooked, and we just didn't feel we could enjoy the garden as we were overlooked. So that was the first way. Now, just to compare, I have had a look at today's prices. So the cost to buy one of these trees has gone from £120, it's now £300 at least for a tree. That's the cheapest that I can see them for. That's the nursery that I bought them from, but I know that they can be up to about £500 a tree. So it's a huge investment. However, don't despair, because there are other ways of doing it if your budget doesn't stretch to that. So after 3 or 4 years of having this row of hornbeam, we just enjoyed it so much. One of the real benefits of putting it in is just the amount of birds and nature that it attracts to the garden. The birds absolutely love it. I don't know if you can hear, but the sound of the birds play in it. We put bird feeders in there, so all year round it provides this interest of the just watching the birds. It's absolutely a joy. And the other thing with it being deciduous, it provides seasonal interest. So in the autumn we get nice colours, and it's just such a lovely thing to have. So we liked it so much that we wanted to plant another row, because it was quite obvious that, because we just had one row here, it was quite obvious that we were hiding something, and we wanted, instead of it just to be there to block out a view, we thought it would be quite nice to make it into a feature and to have an avenue of trees. So we wanted to plant another row, and we needed 8 trees to do that, but we didn't really want to spend the amount of money that we'd already invested in the first row. We thought we'd find a cheaper way of doing it, so we looked at different options. Now this time we bought standard hornbeam trees, so they were half the price, so they cost £60 a tree, so a big saving there. And they were exactly the same height, but they weren't on a framework, and the branches ran all the way down to the bottom, so they were just standard trees that you could easily use just as a normal hedge. So we bought them, and they, as I say, they weren't on a structure at all, they were just trees. So the good thing about that is that it was a lot easier to plant. So we dug holes, put the trees in, and that was a lot easier. And then we added the framework afterwards. So that is a really good way of doing it, and it cut the cost, as it would say. It was half the price, and I have looked at today's prices, so it was £60 when we did it, and that was 2020 we put them in. The price of that now is £120 a tree, so it has gone up, but it's still a big saving on the £300 tree. Now the thing with doing it this way is that it is a lot easier to plant the trees, definitely, but you do have to then fit the bamboo structure after that, which can be quite fiddly, but we'll come on to that in a little while. And the other thing that had to be done was that the lower branches had to be completely cut off, so they were all pruned off at the time of planting. So the third way of achieving this effect is what we did for the lime tree. So back in 2013, the council were doing a Trees for Free scheme where you could apply for some trees. We're just encouraging people to plant more trees. Anyway, we got some beech hedge, and we also applied for some lime trees and got them. In my head I envisaged this lovely lime avenue. So anyway, got these 10 trees, supposedly trees, and Alistair went to pick them up, and I remember at the time saying to him, oh, I don't know if you're going to fit them, it's 10 trees, I don't know if you're going to fit them in your car. And when he arrived home, they were about this size, they were minuscule, and I was very underwhelmed and very unimpressed. So I put them in some pots and just left them round in the vegetable patch. I don't even think I watered them particularly, but when I looked they'd grown, and they'd filled their pots and were outgrowing the pots, so I potted them on, and I did this a few times. Lime trees are very, very fast growing, so if you want a very fast growing pleached row, go for lime. They're very quick. Joshua and I planted them in the ground in their final position where we wanted them, and as soon as they went into the ground, they were like a rocket. They took off, and before long they were sort of 6, 7 foot, 8 foot, 9 foot tall. They just grew so quickly, and when we suddenly realised that they'd got really big and we hadn't really done anything with them, we'd put some supports either side of them as they got a bit bigger. But this year we thought we've really got to do something with them because they're just getting bigger and bigger. In summary, to grow a hedge like this for very little money, then just buy some very whippy little trees, or if you can get them free, then that's even better. But just some little whippy trees, grow them on in pots, keep putting them into a bigger and bigger pot. They grow really fast, especially if they're limes. And then when they get to probably like my height, 5-6 foot tall, put them in the ground, and they will very quickly grow on and get to be much, much bigger. So space them out, and even though they're small, it's hard to imagine that they will be big, but they will get big. So space them out 5 or 6 foot apart. If you're planting them in front of a fence, standard fence panel is 6 foot, then put one in the middle of each panel because that will just look better. So plant them and just let them grow on. Put some supports in, a bamboo or you know, some sort of wooden support for them to grow against, to support them in the wind. Get them to grow to a reasonable height, and during that time you can start constructing your bamboo framework. So you've got plenty of time to do that, but put in the bamboo framework and then grow the trees onto that framework. So we're going to look at how to do this. So these are the limes that we're going to pleach, and you can see that when we put them in, obviously they were very, very tiny, so we have actually put them in a bit too close. I think it's best to do probably 6 foot apart, and these are only about 4 foot apart, but it doesn't matter, and they will still get the same look. So what we've been doing as they've been growing, Al's been taking out all the lower branches, and then he's tried to take out the forward and back facing branches so that we've mostly got lateral growth, which he can then attach to the frame. So this is the first frame that I've made. So we need to do one of these for each of the 7 trees, and coincidentally I've worked out that you need 7 5-foot bamboos. So that's the 5 foot size, 7 5-foot bamboos, 2 6-foot bamboos, and they're the ones that go into the point in the middle. And then you'll need, I counted 17 zip ties, so we're going to get through a lot of zip ties. So we've got a few bags of those, and that just makes it really strong. So that's the first one made, so I'm going to just get to work making the others. So I begin by laying out the 7 bamboos, the 7 5-foot bamboos, to make a square, and then I put another 3 across the middle, and then I just zip tie them together. So I do all the outer ones first, I do the corners first, and then I do these ones next. So that's that. And you want them to look quite even, because especially when you're starting out, the trees are still if they're quite small, then the structure is what you see, particularly in the winter if you're doing it on deciduous trees, it's quite apparent. So it's good to make it look nice, because it's quite an architectural feature. It does look quite nice. So, and then just do the inner ones as well, and they end up being quite strong. And what you want to do as you do more and more, you want to make sure that which this one isn't really, you want to make sure this is about the same, the rows are in the same place. So that's just line those up, because what you want to do is the branches all want to be, you want to kind of create tiers of branches. So that one's a bit high, I think. That's better. That's better. And it's a good idea to wear knee pads, because you end up walking about on your knees. So I've got knee pads in these trousers. That's all 7 frames made. So all that's left to be done is just to trim the bamboo. So I've just got these loppers, and they're quite effective at just cutting these off. And then I'll just go around cutting off all the excess zip tie. So just go through that. Just makes it look neat and tidy. So I'll just tidy up the rest of these, and that's 7 of them made, and if you line them all up they should roughly make the same shape, and then you know it's even. Next, Alistair begins the process of adding the framework. He's just putting in the posts, so he's got some 6-foot poles and he sinks them by 2 foot into the ground.
So to ensure you don't split the wood, because you'll never be able to hammer this down fully, what you need to do is dig a pre-hole, and that's why you saw me with the auger there, digging it out. And then what I do is I then push down a hole, and I use this, a long chisel, just to give me some extra depth, or you can use a rod just to break up the soil. We're lucky we're on sand here, so you can dig quite easily through this, but I want these in about 4 foot from the ground, and you can see that that's absolutely fine. So it's integral to the part of the tree, and I made myself up this guide. This is a 2-foot piece of batten marked in the centre, so these will be exactly the same all the way along. I might have problems down the end there. We've got some old stumps around here, so I'll have to figure out around there, but we'll see what we can get through. But then that evens it out. But for the look of the thing, particularly on these pleached trees, you want it to look as formal as possible. So everything has to be in order. You can't just whack in anything.
So Al's just added 2 posts for each tree, and then a cross beam just to keep it really, really firm. So that's looking excellent, really straight and looking lovely. So we're just on the 7th tree, so they're all stakes are in, the bracing's in. Alice has just put in the strapping on the last one. So what he does, we'll just zoom in here. So he puts a bit of foam just between the wood and the tree just to cushion it. This garden is incredibly windy, so it's really important to get really good stakes in and really, really strong, because once you add the bamboo structure, it becomes a bit like a sail. So it has to be really, really strong. So that one, he's just done that one, you can just see, and then he uses the strapping again, just to belt and braces, just to wrap around the tree. And he's got an air gun, which makes the job a lot quicker, but you can just use a staple gun if necessary. So the strapping that he's using is this kind of like a webbing material, so it will hold it very firmly, but there's no give in it, whereas the ones that we used on the Hornbeam are more kind of rubber, so there's a little bit more give. So it's just important to keep a close eye on them and just renew them as the tree gets bigger, otherwise it will constrict the growth. So we're doing quite well now. 6 of the limes have now been pleached. It is quite a little bit time consuming, but I think you'll agree the effect just looks fantastic. So that's the 6 that have been done. So there's 1 remaining, and that's this one on the end. So we've left that one because he's going to just talk us through what he does, how he does it. And this is the view from the other side of the pleached lime trees, and I think you'll agree they look lovely. So we'll just get on and do the last remaining one.
So you would have seen earlier that we put in the side supports for the trees to give it that structure, and we've anchored the trees down so that ensures that they carry on growing in a vertical way, and we keep that shape. But also because of the wind that it's going to take, where we are, this is coming from a westerly direction, it ensures that the tree won't rock through on there. Following that, you then want to put in these outward supports, and I've used these. Preferably I would have probably chosen a bit longer than these, but these are pretty adequate for now. And these side structures, I've put a few more within the centre of the frame as well. Give it that extra benefit from the wind, and they're going to hold up these A-frames that you have. And then following that, once you've got those in alignment, you then put in a row of the bamboos at the base, and that gives you then a structure to tie your frames onto. Because remember, this is all about weather resistance, giving it rigidity and also strength, because this tree is pretty heavy and it will want to push against the frame itself. So you want to ensure that you've got that strength and that benefit for being resistant from the weather as well. We're nearly at the end of finishing the pleaching here, and one of the things to bear in mind is that you want the structure to be straight and true as possible for the eye, because when the leaves come off you'll start to see the structure come back through again, and obviously you're encouraging all the side branching to come out, but you will see the structure. But so it's important that, particularly in the early years of the growth, that the structure is very, very straight. The bamboo tends to last quite a while because it's not in direct contact with soil. We found that this will last at least 5 or 6 years, the bamboo. So don't be afraid to putting that into as a main structure. And we've been using cable ties here to hold it all in place. And what I prefer to use is actually some of these soft ties. So we've been using a lot of the soft wire ties. Now these, in the long term, aren't great because the rubber does degrade and the wire will come through. However, for putting these up as a support, they're really quick and easy. And I tend to overcut them because ultimately this is going to get bigger, and it's easy then to just run around and readdress them rather than cutting more wires off. It's easy to just literally take this off and wrap it back around again. But you want it to be semi-firm, not too tight, because this is going to swell. And if you're not tracking these carefully, you'll see that the wire will actually start digging into the branch. So that's perfectly good. You can see here this will come across, and I'm about to put the last structure support, which we've got over here, in place, and then this will pick up these other laterals. And this is probably one of the areas, certainly when you're creating this hedge, you don't mind cross branching. Usually in tree pruning we try and reduce cross branching and rubbing, but because it's going to be held firm against the bamboo structure, crossing is actually not a problem with these. And in fact, the traditional pleaching is about the actual growth of the branches into each other, and that then creates that stronger structure. So once you've got your A-frames, what you need to do is try and position them over the trees, and these are quite mature in themselves now, and what we want to do here is thread some of these branches across. Now what I've done historically is actually pruned these out so there are more laterals going from left to right rather than a lot of branches coming out. However, obviously trees being trees, you've still got a lot of these branches that are coming forward. But for pleaching purposes, and because these are very juvenile plants, we can actually bend these back in, and so we would use these as cross members. But what you need to do is identify what branches you might have to take out. And certainly behind us here, I'm going to be taking out one of those limbs because it's just gone too far that way. So let's start to put this on, and we'll start threading through some of the branches. And again, you need to be just careful that you're not going to snap anything off. And what I need to do is keep this obviously in a horizontal position to the rest of the framework. So we'll start to thread some of these through to get a general feel for how this will come together. Some of these, particularly the long ones at the top, I'm obviously going to take out and reduce them down. But we'll do that towards the end. But I'm literally just threading some of these through now and just kind of carefully seeing how we can weave this into the frame itself. And that's really where I want it to be. And what I want to do now is, if I can just support it like that, I'll come down and, using a mixture of cable ties, I've got some really long ones and I've got some short ones. Obviously these are quite flexible, you can join them up. what we'll do is we'll just put this frame onto the rail, and it's important that these rails are put in at the very beginning because that gives you that straight line. Again, use a string line so you get this in a perfectly horizontal position, and then you can put the frame against it. I'm feeling a bit of resistance here, and some of these branches may need to come over. We may need to think about these again, but you can kind of see now the structure will tie in more or less to the frame. And I'll just hold this in now with one of the cable ties in, just so it's not going to droop away. So what you're looking for here is you want to try and keep all of the bars in a rough line, and perpendicular to each other, so you can move them up and slide them down when they're cabled in like this. And you can kind of see then the structures will form that neat line. So again, I'll just put this on, and we've got that. One of the other tips as well, when you're actually making the frames, to pull these tight, I get pliers to pull the cable ties without splitting them, so they really start to grip, otherwise they can have a tendency to slide off. But you can kind of see now the structure is starting to come together, and I will just take it up the top there and start tying it into the tree itself. So you need to secure the branches across the framework using some soft wire tie. Make sure they're not too tight, so it allows them still to continue growing out as laterals. You may pinch some of the leaves, but don't worry about this, they will soon grow back if you damage any of the leaves across, and the frame will start to fill out.
So we've finished pleaching the lime trees behind me, and in the next video what we'd like to do is just do a video on how to maintain a more established hedge. So as I said, we've got the other two pleached rows. We've got the one that's been in since 2014. So we've recently just pruned that. We just pruned it in the last day or two, and it's looking really tight. And then on the other side we've got this one, which is looking quite shaggy, so that needs some attention. There's lots of loose branches that need to be tied in. So join us in the next video when we'll be showing you the next process of pleaching trees. Thank you very much for watching, and join us again. Bye for now.